sometimes people, it's a dichotomy. They both think that you're untouchable, and then they will say it. And some people, we were talking about what are the funny things people say to you, and one of them is, "Can I touch you?" Mm-hmm. And you don't know what to say.
No right answer.
I mean, you don't know what to say. Where? But you know, it is a very, and then it makes you feel like you're kind of a freak. And you know, we sometimes laugh and say, you know, I feel like, you know, there's one of them. I've never seen one of them before. I see those people, you know, that's somebody's in a zoo, and that's the way you feel. And you walk around and somebody will, you see people whispering. And the funny thing is that they usually get you mixed up. At least that's what's happened to us. And I have to tell you a funny story about my mother in reference to you. I was with my mother, and we were traveling. We were in, I think it was in the Louvre, and we were seeing this fantastic exhibit. And there was a woman that kept running around, kind of following behind us. And she'd come up to my mother and she'd say, "I know who you are." And what do you do when someone says that? You smile, you know, because you hope you know who you are. And so forth. And they went on. And then she kept coming up and she said, I've got a great cure for arthritis. And let me tell you about it. And Mother'd say, "Oh, thank you so much. But, and she'd say, "I know, you're Betty Ford." And Mother would say, "No, I know Mrs. Ford, and she's a lovely lady, but no, I'm not Betty Ford." And I'd say, "I know you want to keep it a secret. You don't want everybody to know. I won't tell anybody else in the museum, but let me tell you about..." Well, anyway, this went on for about 15 minutes. And finally my mother turned to me and she said, "Well, you know, I just ought to talk to her about this because I have a little arthritis in my finger." But I have been mistaken for all sorts of people. First, they think that I'm Luci, and they'll say, "Don't you remember seeing me in Spokane?" And I've never been there. And then when they get over that, they will, you know, they remember I'm a daughter of a first family. They just don't remember which family. And I've been called accused of being all sorts of people. And so it does happen. And it happens still in the job I'm in now. People know you're somebody, but they can't quite remember who it is.
Well, I think we've all had, you know, that misunderstanding. I had the woman come up to me and out of the country over in France recently and said, "Mrs. Carter, Mrs. Carter." And I thought, shall I walk on? This was in a crowd. I knew what she meant.
I've been called Mrs. Ford, Mrs. Nixon, Mrs. Maddox.
They just know that we're... But, Susan, how does it change your relationships with your friends and whatnot? I mean, we know with the press and all that, but you have friends, and then when you move in the White House, what happens?
You have new friends. It's amazing having grown up in Alexandria, and I had my friends, and I had gone to elementary school and middle school all there, and it was somewhat of a culture shock for them because they couldn't just drop by to see me without calling ahead of time, and I cleared them at the gate and all the necessary things. But it's amazing all the other people that instantly become your friend to help them do whatever, and you have to be leery. That they want to get to know you because you are Susan and not Susan Ford. And I think that's very difficult, and it's hard to decipher the difference. I have no clues on how to do it. You just kind of do it, and it either works out or it doesn't. I think probably one of the interesting experiences, and we were talking about this yesterday, Mother was, the Johnson girls and Lady Bird were coming to Washington, and they wanted to come and visit the house, and I had not met the girls before, and I was fascinated to meet them and hear their stories and what was your bedroom and that kind of thing. And it was the afternoon before my mother went in the hospital to have her mastectomy. And so the girls came to the house, and we took them all over the second floor and all over the third floor so that they could see how the White House had changed. And so we had tea, and we sat and talked for quite a while, and then Mother's secretary called you all, and I don't know where you were staying at the time.
We were staying at my sister's house in Virginia. your mother's secretary called and said, we think you might be glued to the television set waiting to see the results of, we had dedicated the LBJ Grove in Washington that afternoon, and of course we were all lined up taking tickets for who got first place to see it, and said that Mrs. Ford very graciously wanted to let us know that indeed she was going to be going to the hospital, and didn't want us to hear it abruptly over the news, and the reason why. And I think that's an indication of just the kind of class this lady has. The fact that this was our big day. I mean, the dedication of the Grove meant an awful lot to our family. But of all families in the whole world that she could have said, I'm so sorry, I'm just not going to be able to see you, we didn't need an excuse.
But there's that relationship of respect for the other families. It's a very close fraternity sorority group. There's no membership rules that you have to do to become a first family member. And you want to draw on anybody that you possibly can to figure out how to deal with a situation.
Telling me about the phone option and the campaign options. I didn't know those options existed. And I'm sure that my father is thrilled to death that I didn't know those options existed. Yes, Mrs. Ford, I think that there are old friends, deep friends who feel like they don't want to impose and that they don't want to assume, who stand back. And I think there are new friends who appear on the scene who may be less than genuinely committed to you as an individual. And I know we went through that stage, my sister and I both, of wariness. Of, you know, are they for real or are they not? Do they love me because of my delightful personality or because of who I happen to be related to? And I think it all boiled down, for me, to it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. And, you know, you do your best and you hope it's genuine. But the other side of it is that when you're in a first family, you're not an island. Everything you do and say reflects so much upon all the members of your family and upon your, especially if you're a child, upon your father's administration. And that's an awful lot of responsibility, so you are worried if you blow it.
When you bring up the fact that, and I hear you saying everything you do, and I hear this morning how all of you were perhaps filling a role model that you thought you had to fill, just as perhaps we were trying to do the same thing, but maybe a little more easily with a staff and in our own way. But in filling all those things, everything I say and everything I do you think that being there, you were able to affect anything that you're interested in now as a woman and in politics today, not particularly party politics, but politically speaking?
Yes, I think that my father looked on me as an equal. I think he believed that my sex didn't keep me from doing lots of different things. And I would say it was not so much a result of the White House, but just my own parents, that they believed that we should all live up to the best that God gave us. And my father always was pushing us. As Lucy said earlier, he pushed Mother and stretched us into doing things we thought we could never do, and some we didn't want to do. And he did the same with us. And he would say, oh yes, we need you to do that. And that gave you the self-confidence. And I think that's one of the things that's important for women. We need to have self-confidence. And we talked earlier this morning about how we enjoy being the daughter of Lady Bird and Lyndon Johnson. I enjoy being the wife of Chuck Robb. I enjoy being the mother of Cindy and Kathy and Jennifer. But I think more women nowadays are saying, I also want to be perceived as my own person, as Betty Ford, who has done so much to reach out to people all over the country and have them deal with their problems and accept them. We want to not just, oh yes, she's the wife of. I mean, that the independence, the stature you've given as your own person, not as just an appendage. Nobody wants to be seen, I don't think, anymore as an appendage, women.
Lynda, but I think that what I'm trying to get at isn't this because of the role, for instance, that you acquire as the daughter of, you become, and as you also were attached to a very important family, so what you said and did was important, and that has carried over later into life.
Well, in my case, I had anonymity after I married. So that is that is a big difference. That's why I said I had a lot of the pleasures without the pressures.